Work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it. Work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Hello, hello, hello.
Check.
Check.
Cool. So is this one front porch session?
Yeah, we had the back porch session where we had a nice late summer rainstorm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're out here shivering. It's like 20 degrees. We're on an open air porch.
Yeah. We're COVID safe, don't worry.
Right. Hey,
Mask
we're working for those
on.
Patreon subscriptions.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the Patreons. Oh my God. It's been amazing.
Hell yeah. That's a good way to
Yeah.
start off. We want to share some election reflections today.
Uh-huh.
But before, for everybody tuning in, supporters on Patreon, just like the outpouring of support we've been receiving continuously, and then the boost we got in November, it's really appreciated, and it's really exciting. That's been kind of the highlight of my election season.
Yes. It's been a light in this
Yes.
dark tunnel.
Yes. Thank you. Truly. It's been amazing.
So where should we begin? I
Good
guess
question.
initial thoughts, like what was going through your minds, you know? It was kind of a hellish week from election day up until that Saturday when the final decision was made. Pennsylvania came through or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, voting was pretty easy for me. I gave my ballot to Isaac, and Isaac dropped it off. So it's definitely the easiest voting I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
How'd you vote, Jake?
Get you a man like Isaac.
I went over to the local Lutheran church, you know. They had a nice, same church where I practiced parallel parking back in high school, you know.
Nice.
So it was a little throwback, but
There you go.
The
I
local
went
Lutheran.
downtown. Me and Michaela went downtown like the week before Election Day to the little drop-in center that's across the street from the
Yeah.
government center. We had like a little bit of a difficulty where they mislabeled our ballots. So then they had to like switch them up, and I think it worried my partner a little bit. But yeah, it was all right. I felt kind of gross afterwards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I felt partly was like, all right, bet. Yeah, I want to show up and participate in it. You know what I'm saying? And like, I want to do my little part. And honestly, though, I felt embarrassed to vote for Biden and Harris. You know, like I did. I'll say
Yeah.
that. Somebody asked me, and they're like, oh, bro, you voted for Biden and Harris? And I was like, yeah. And I think that's like maybe a good way to get into general reflections is like, I had a bad feeling the whole time, and it really brought me
Yeah.
back to the reality that was like really bad choices that we were given. It's a really oppressive state of affairs, and I just had that like heavy, murky feeling kind of like
Yeah.
that dominated my week. I think I was concerned about violence on election day, you know, and the heartening parts of like the electoral season for me were like the actually connecting with people
Yeah.
around election defense, or even talking to my neighbors and stuff. But I was surprised that there wasn't a higher degree of violence, to be honest. In that sense, I felt it's almost like embarrassing to say I felt this some relief, you know, because there's nothing to be relieved by. It's not a good situation. But in that sense, I remember like looking at the clock, and my partner works overnight, so that week I was mostly up in the nighttime, which also had like this heavy feeling. But I remember feeling like, okay, you know, there wasn't like a really coordinated mass right-wing violence, and I thought there was a potential for that.
Is that giving you a more positive outlook for the potential coup? You're like, maybe this coup will just sizzle?
Not really. I guess I'm curious to hear how y'all feel about it. To me, I'm like, okay, from my assessment right now, it's like it doesn't look like the Trump administration is taking it seriously enough, or is organized enough, or they have enough power inside of the state apparatus with like in the military, in the different departments. So I feel like in that sense, a coup doesn't look likely. But then I've also realized like I don't feel like joking about it, or I don't feel like necessarily when I see people like, it's cool to clown Trump, fuck Trump, and it's good to like, there wasn't that type of violent coup that people had imagined, but also like there was right-wing violence in the streets yesterday. They are pushing the edge and pushing the limit, and I don't trust the Democrats to do anything to protect us, and they haven't really. So in that sense, I'm like, it seems like there'll be a transition to the Biden administration, but I think there actually is, like, when I look back at how it's gone down, I don't think it's like a good time to exhale, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember seeing like these really bad takes where people were like, we beat fascism. And I'm like, you don't understand what fascism is if you're saying that at this point.
This is for real, though.
Like, the Biden administration is going to perpetrate a lot of fascism, especially on other countries. But I don't know. It's just the way the election went down, and it was a really unconvincing victory, I guess, if you want to call it that, for Democrats.
Yeah.
And I've just been thinking, like, what if Trump does pass a second stimulus like this past summer? I'm convinced he would have probably won, and maybe it's close, but I think he definitely would have won. And it's like, okay, COVID won't even take him down. It has to be him, like, completely mishandling a pandemic. And not giving any material relief for him to barely lose at this point. And that's a really sad state of affairs for your opposition party to straight up white supremacist fascism at this point, you know?
Yeah, I just got off the phone with my dad today, and he was just like, I predicted a coup, and then on WNYC they were talking about a coup, and I was like, okay, yeah, you didn't make that up. Like, it's been in the news for a little while. But I forgot my train of thought. Just that he was, excited Trump's out, and then also concerned that he might run for 2024. And predicting that he'll join some news outlet and become a talking head, which I was like, yeah, that seems pretty perfect for him. Like, the right amount of limelight, fanfare, everyone agreeing with him. Like, he gets camera time all the time.
OAN maybe, or whatever.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I think that's a good point that you make, Isaac, in terms of, like, there's if in certain circles, I suppose, like, a gloating mood amongst people that the Democrats won, and to really look at, like, Trump expanded his voter base, and I again don't think that's so much of a credit to them as it is, like, really how bad the Democrats are. Like, that's what I keep coming down to, I guess, is like my biggest reflection leaving the election season is like, we need so much better. There's absolutely no momentum from the Democrats because they're Republican light. Like, I had to sit back and think about it more, and I'm like, it's still astonishing to me that, like, literally they had more Republicans speaking at the DNC. Kasich is out there being one of their surrogates in the media, who's one of the most oppressive Republican governors. And these are the people they're lifting up. So it's not, I felt like I was nervous to say it, or like it's tiresome to say because it sounds almost like you're exaggerating or stating the obvious. But I still think it's important to say, like, the Democrats do not have our interest at heart. It's not, they are Republicans. They want corporate domination of our life. They're committed to racism. They're committed to mass incarceration. And so to the end, just like so much weaker at it without any of, like, the entertainment or any of the energy that the Trump milieu had, that it's like they literally lost votes from almost every demographic to Donald Trump. You got to be so fucking bad to do that.
And there's this constant pattern of them letting the Republicans frame every issue, which has just always been just this complete downfall of the Democratic Party, is like with defund the police and with I'm trying to think of some other things.
I mean, we were talking about this the other night of, like, their focus is on equality more so than human rights. It's just, like, to make things equal. So, like, same-sex marriage, but it's not actually, like, bolstering rights to support folks that are outside of, like, hetero marriages.
Giving everyone an equal opportunity to claw and bite and try to climb their way up this capitalist ladder at any cost to their physical and mental health. And
that majority of people won't ever attain whatever they're working towards.
And I feel like really disconnected from the mood and the experiences of people, like that type of canned, fake, watered down equity language as opposed to like there's a real forward-looking revolutionary energy in the country. I think like most young people know that if we don't change the political economy in like deep, serious ways, that their future is in jeopardy, and they want that. So it's like all that old ass, fake ass, corporate, corny ass justice language, like it's not connecting with anybody. You know, it's not motivating people. I guess I'm not surprised. What I think about other takeaways is like, the Democrats who won the election for Joe Biden, who really took Trump out of the administration, were like the only pocket where there's energy in the Democratic Party, which is the left. You know, it was like Rashida Tlaib in Michigan. It was Ilhan Omar in Minnesota. It was AOC. It was Cory Bush. And that's just the facts. And it was like those organizing machines, which are built to turn people out, which work with people all year, which have like are putting forward a working class agenda with momentum. They still had to save it for the Democratic Party. And it's like, that's the only place where there's any momentum, I think.
And just that correlation between these cities that saw mass uprisings also deciding the election. So you had like Atlanta and, you know, the suburbs, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, like these cities that had mass mobilizations of working class, poor folk. Yeah. Also tilting the scale and giving Joe Biden his narrow victory, you know?
Yeah.
Did you see, I don't remember her name. I could look it up later, but that woman who was like blaming everyone because she didn't like get office. It was somewhere in Southeast.
Claire McCaskill?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. She was like blaming it on the gays for not voting for her, but then also saying like it was just like a flip-flop.
She was saying something about like speaking about trans issues turns off made it harder for like just basically saying like left issues are not popular and that if you talk about them and have your party co-opt those, it's not going to work out for you. And that's like what a lot of people were saying, I feel like, in terms of like bashing the left and saying that we didn't get the Senate because of defund the police. That was a big thing. Jim Clyburn said that, definitely.
Yeah, I've seen that argument coming from various different sources and kind of lumped them all together, like didn't parse too deep into each individual race, but it's like it's a fantasy, you know. It's like it's really like, and it's standard. You knew that they were going to do that. It really brings me back. I don't want to harp on like the primaries too much, but it really it's not about Bernie Sanders, the character, the individual, even though like, you know, Bernie was in a position to be the catalyst for that type of coalition, but it's about the coalition. And regardless of like, and I think it proved itself again that that approach, a left-wing populist approach that was pushing popular social democratic policies like student debt forgiveness, Medicare for all, I really think would have ran the board. Like I really think would have turned out voters. And it was like whatever vestige of that was allowed to remain despite literally Biden and them trying to kill that. You know what I'm saying? Like, black and brown and working class people beat Trump despite the efforts of the DNC and Democratic leadership to keep Trump in office is how I really feel. It's like, because the issue cuts down to like really they share a consensus with Trump. The GOP and the Democrats is to show like, I've been thinking more about, we've talked about it on the show a few times and I've heard other podcasters make this like analogy or whatever, but like to think about it like pro wrestling in a sense and to acknowledge that Trump has always been a heel, an evil character to create innocence in other characters. And I think that played itself like you have to have somebody as evil and scary and cartoonish as Trump to any way make it acceptable for Joe Biden to be the Democratic presidential candidate, because it's like, this is an aging racist with a terrible record of sexual assault, of terrible public policies. It's a fucking crime. Like I guess this is my big reflection. I'm just going to go off now. It's like, I wasn't sure what I was going to say when we talked. Yeah. But if I really go deep into how I felt about election, I'm just super angry that we had to choose between this two. And it's like, I know what the GOP is, but it's like, and I know what the Democrats are, and the fact that they forced Joe Biden on us and Kamala Harris on us, it's like, it's disgusting. It's unacceptable. It makes me really feel like, I I want to participate in a socialist political party, in a political movement that has momentum, that has vision, that has principles, that knows who its base is. I even go back to like, I remember in like 2017, the municipal elections when everybody was running Democrats, I remember feeling like, fuck, man, I don't want to. I've been, you know, even during Obama's second term, I made up my mind. Like, we can't keep playing this game. And then I got kind of forced back into it. Or not forced, I made the choice. And I understand that there's arguments for like creating a big tent party or like trying to work through the structure of the Democrats. But I got to be honest with myself that I don't feel it. I don't think it's, I think we could work with those people, or I could work with those people and know that they're doing good work. But if we don't have a countervailing force like that's really moving something, we're only going to become more susceptible to fascism, I feel like. And just off general principle, I'm like, these motherfuckers are war criminals. You know what I'm saying? That's not hyperbole. I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
They invaded fucking Iraq and killed millions of people. The people were my age. You know what I'm
Joe
saying?
Biden
Like,
should be in The Hague right now
exactly.
for being
Fuck him.
fair about like harm perpetrated on the world. I mean,
yeah, it's a dying, decaying party that like co-ops language, doesn't have any principles, only interested in protecting its business interests. And like, I don't know, you were saying like, I don't know who all the people that Biden's like, you know, thinking about for his cabinet, but not hopeful.
The big name that's been going around is Cecilia Munoz, who was basically the face on mass deportations in the Obama administration, someone who defended kids in cages. So like all these liberals who were like, we need to get these kids out of cages. Okay, well, your guy just elevated someone to his transition team who's fine with kids in cages and who is like, you know, a fascist. You know, let's say what it is. It's fascism when you're doing what they're doing in terms of immigration policy.
Yeah, it's literally like textbook what people expected in terms of like, there is a lot of consensus. There's more consensus than difference between Obama's immigration policies and Trump's. And yeah, they went right back to the architect of their deportation policies, and they're thinking about putting her in there. And what's more, I think, offensive about it is they're celebrating it as like a racial justice accomplishment because this woman is Bolivian. She like, you know, she wrote a whole book about women of color and leadership, but she looks like a white Bolivian to me. I know, you know, it's not my place to say how she identifies, but the idea that they were lifting up this woman who grew up wealthy, who's literally like one of the main enemies of the immigrant justice movement, and putting her in there and then marketing it as like some kind of
a win for the women of color out there.
Right after the Democrats just floundered at the border, especially in Texas, like you had I forget what county it was, but there's a county that went for Hillary by like 50 points, and I think Biden carried it by like 8 points this election. So just recognizing that complete disinvestment from, you know, border communities that should be easily swayed with like a socialist or populist agenda coming from the left. But just being completely taken for granted with the current Democratic regime.
And you can't shame people.
Is this her? Yeah, she looks like a white lady.
She kind of looks like Amy McGrath a little bit.
She has like a plaid shirt in this picture.
Did you guys see that really annoying video of that person on, maybe Isaac, my Twitter comrade might have seen it, but there was like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like a person who was screaming in the camera about fascism, but they had like a really, I don't know, annoying face and voice, but it has the same face as Cecilia Munoz.
Gotcha.
The video, I was curious. I was looking yesterday. I wanted to hear more about. I wonder what her feelings on Evo Morales are, or the movement towards socialism. I'm curious about her family's Bolivian roots.
Yeah, maybe something to look into.
Yeah.
What other appointments did you see? Are they talking about?
People were like psyched that there'd be the first imperialist head of the Pentagon, who's a woman. You know, I forgot her name, like Michelle Flournoy. I don't know. I think she worked in the Obama administration, but you know, imperialist, all about regime change. And I think that's the scary thing out of a more, I don't want to say composed, because Biden's going to have gaffe after gaffe, and he's going to be more of a puppet than George W. Bush was at this point, I think. But an administration that can put a nice face on foreign policy, because like Trump did a lot of horrible things with his foreign policy, but he was a lot less effective at regime change than say Obama even. And I think you had like Democratic senators mad that he couldn't pull off a regime change in Venezuela.
Right.
Which is just like, yeah, it's scary to think about that, because Iran has been a major adversary of the Democratic establishment, as well as China. Now they're like pivoting towards this like proto Cold War with China, and it's like, yeah, it reminds me how awful this government is as it currently stands, and how detrimental it is to not only people around the world, but the world itself and our ability to survive on it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was thinking, okay, so I was listening to Latino USA, which is like another NPR podcast, and I was like with it, and I was like, like, yeah, this is awesome, like, the people that they're interviewing, I was like here for what they were saying. They were talking about accomplishments in Arizona and Nevada, yeah, and just like mobilization in Miami, and how that's like a hard one with the Cuban American demographic there, that's like, we fled communism. And I was like with the people that were interviewing, these organizers in Arizona, and then till the end, and she was just like, we want more than just being the Secretary of HUD. We want to be the Secretary of Defense. Like, we want Latinos, and like, and I was just like, no, like, I was so with you. And then to be like, no, we need to be like in more powerful positions of imperialism, essentially. I was just like, no, fuck that. Like, I'm not trying to like recreate the same harm that our oppressors have enacted on us. Like, I'm trying to create a different world that doesn't like involve enacting harm on other people in order to feel good and powerful.
Yeah.
Right?
Nah, for real. I think that like, even hearing you say that, I do think that like a lot of people feel the way that you feel. Like I think it's like there's like a growing consciousness that that's not acceptable. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't equal change. I think it's like that's something else that like I guess I picked up during the election, or around elections in general, and kind of watching the way people were responding to the election, is like, I really don't want to be around the hyper ambitious careerist ladder climbing, and it's like, I'm an ambitious person. I want to have as big of an impact as I can, and I want to be my best, and that's not wrong, and like we want to have talented, motivated people in our movements and everything, but it's just that whole Democrat attitude of like achieve, succeed, and I think a lot of times the ways that like a good word I learned this summer that named something that I felt frustrated with in the past, is like that type of kind of ladder climbing ethic is tied into like when racial justice is framed in like disparitarian terms. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's important to diagnose and acknowledge the racial disparities that we experience in America. That's disgusting. That's like the thrust of our movements is to change that, to redistribute wealth and power. But when it's framed as disparities, it's a lot of times becomes a part of this capitalist program that just means then like, okay, well, we're just going to make everybody as poor as Black people and Native people, and then as long as you see proper proportionate representation to people's status in the population, that equals justice. That does not equal justice at all. And that's really, when you think about it, that's the GOP ideology as well. And I think that says something to the fact that like there is a way that right-wing politics can co-opt racial justice. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I think again why it's really detrimental for us to have the Democrats like taking up space on the left is because they have no answer for that. And you've seen that they're hemorrhaging support because nobody feels that shit the Democrats are talking about. At least the right wing is coming with some more energy or some different framing,
Yeah, I mean, the Republican controlled Senate got everyone a $1,200 check, which was like something I never would have imagined happening. Not to like give them props for that, but like, yeah, would have been curious to see how a Hillary administration would have handled this,
Yeah.
And what kind of framing they would have put on things. Granted, like there's no way of knowing that at the same time.
Yeah. it's funny because I hear people saying like, okay, now we got Joe Biden in there so we could deal with the coronavirus. And I'm like, what the fuck do you think he's about to do? Like,
he's not going to do a shutdown, like a complete shutdown.
Yeah. People were dying from preventable illness the whole time he was vice president. Like, he doesn't believe in anything different than what exists now. Like, you're not, it's frustrating to hear that shit.
Yeah, it's concerning too because like he's coming in right as like vaccines will start becoming widely or available potentially to some extent. So like I'll be curious to see how they like create this narrative of Joe Biden the savior, because I'm sure that's coming around the corner, especially if like coronavirus is quelled from where it is now, which is just a raging uncontrollable pandemic. And it should have never, I mean, people are having fucking music festivals in Taiwan right now. Like, it's so mad just seeing how other parts of the world have their shit together, and the richest country in the world is absolutely floundering right now.
But they are making sure to hoard as many potential vaccines as possible because they are buying a lot of like copyrights to potential vaccines from various like private I don't know what the word is, but just like producers, makers, inventors, and then other countries that have the wealth, they're also doing that. So just thinking about the inequitable distribution of a vaccine, if like there is one that works, and how there isn't really a consensus currently of like, if we do figure out a vaccine, we're going to share that.
Yeah.
And we're going to share that and like encourage everyone to like produce their own, it sucks.
It does. Yeah, it brings me back to the Medtronic episode we did where like really realizing that like what we're seeing is the complete lack of like a public health infrastructure and publicly held health resources in common with one another. That's like showing that like the market can't deal with the pandemic. And then
can't save us.
the vaccinerias, you know what I'm saying? Whoever's making the vaccines. And like all the big medical tech industries, it's important for us to recognize that what's happening is they're being publicly subsidized by tax dollars to do the research. Once they get the research done, then they're able to privatize usually the products of that research and create a stream for private profit. So it was like the University of Minnesota taxpayers paid all this money to develop the technology that led to open heart surgery and some of this medical tech. And then those white dudes and small clique of people who were there in the room get to patent that and privatize that. So you have a situation where Medtronic has billions of dollars in the bank and Minnesota's broke as fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, and people can't get health care. It's like, that's the dynamics we're dealing with.
Yeah. I think, I mean, as long as we're talking about the Rona, one thing that's really made me angry as well has been this complete focus on individuals in perpetuating the spread. And it like flies in the face of these same people who are like, climate change isn't an individual thing. Like, one person's not going to change climate change. It's like, yeah, this is the exact same dynamic with coronavirus. And like, if the state isn't doing anything to support people financially and telling them to stay home from their jobs, they're going to go work. And right now we see that with like younger folks who are spreading it the most. They're most likely to be working these service industry jobs. They're most likely to be living with roommates, which increases the size of their pod. And yet they're still getting ridiculed by people who can stay home. And like, we're fortunate enough to be staying home, but I'm not going to blame people that are out there on the front lines because they have to be, and because they have to support their family.
I will blame my dumb friends that are out at the bars on the weekends and like posting shit on social media and just like, what are you doing?
I mean,
what are you doing?
Those bars shouldn't even be open at this point.
I know they shouldn't be open.
They shouldn't have that option.
I get it. It's like, I miss socializing. Like, I want to see people. I understand. Like, it comes a place of like, do I want to be alone all the fucking time or like see the same goddamn person every day?
Come on, my man voted for you and everything. Honestly, I really feel you both, because I think it's beyond just like how cruel it is to individualize things and blame people, you know, people who have to go to work, people who literally aren't going to be able to pay their rent, people who we don't have any support as a society options for poor people to stay home. So, and just again, like thinking about our whole view of the world and the way we understand ourselves and like the way we could diagnose a pandemic is like, it's not an individual reality. We're not individuals at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, we can't, because I seen Biden, it was supposed to be a big triumphant speech on his like first day as president-elect or whatever, talking about a mask is the most single effective tool to stop the pandemic, and it's like that's untrue.
Pay people.
Exactly. Everybody could have a mask and it wouldn't stop the coronavirus pandemic if people still have to go to work, if people still can't get health care, if people still have underlying conditions. Medicare for all, single payer health care would be the most effective tool to stop, and a mask. So it's like I've been really honestly struggling with it, and it's been a lot of like reflections because I don't want to enact that individualistic attitude. Like people shouldn't be ridiculed for getting sick. You know, it's not, you know, it's nobody's fault. We're all going through this together. It's like we have to like grow and develop, I feel like, and tap into like a deep well of compassion and care for each other because the state doesn't care for us. But then on the other hand, I see the way, and it's like an exchange between like the big superstructure, the economy and politics and culture we live in, and then like the individuals. Because what I also see is that America, I don't know if it's just America, but there is an attitude of just immediate gratification of fuck you, pay me, fuck you if you got to go to work and you got to wear your mask while you're serving me. I don't have to. I can sit here without my mask on and go to the bar, you know. And it's like the bars are open, the businesses are open, the government's encouraging people who can to go out there and continue to act like consumers. So it's like as much as it's not individuals' fault, part of the dialectic though is that it is our responsibility, and it's like I am frustrated with people who are not taking it seriously, who are not doing what they can, and it's like I feel like we have to be able to talk about those things together because they're connected. You feel me?
Yeah, definitely.
Any other big like takeaways from the election or like points
national level stuff? Yeah, no, I felt way worse voting for Biden than I did for Hillary, which I think makes sense in terms of like, I'm not trying to minimize Hillary's harm, but like Biden is maybe the weakest candidate ever. I don't have my American politics history down, but like I can't think of a weaker general election.
I want to just say some things because I don't know if everybody sees all the shit. We're all looking at different timelines and stuff, but like he's gotten such a pass where it's like, you know, Joe Biden tried to run for president in the 80s and was forced to suspend his campaign for plagiarism.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it for...
He plagiarized like an Irish
like his
person?
wife.
It was like an English... it was
English?
a Labor Party candidate that he just stole his speeches. I'm pretty sure he was also caught for plagiarism when he was in school. So then there was Tara Reid and the rape allegations against Joe Biden on top of remember when he was a joke candidate before it looked like they would never pick Joe Biden and Creepy Joe, how many you know, the obvious documented inappropriate touching, the fact that Joe Biden was the largest water carrier in the Democratic Party for the war in Iraq. He's responsible in a large part for the war in Iraq with George Bush and them. The fact that he wrote the fucking crime bill in 1994. The fact he's one of the most ardent anti-drug senators in Democratic Party history.
Still won't get behind marijuana legalization.
Still in fucking 2020.
One of the most popular.
Yo, South Dakota legalized that shit. New Jersey legalized that shit.
Medicare for all. Legalized marijuana, national rent control in public housing, single payer health care, a fucking landslide.
Yeah.
So I don't have to keep running down the list of Joe Biden, but like people should really look into the fact that like they got you to vote for a fucking war criminal piece of fucking shit because they created this monster out of Donald Trump, and he is a monster. But it's also like the Democrats and the liberal media class, the capitalist class, they agree with Trump. They gave Trump all his fucking judges. They gave him his budget every time. They keep putting him on TV. They're making him a boogeyman, but they fuck with him more than they fuck with you. You know, so it makes me so mad.
Yeah, the only young person that's pushed for in government, Supreme Court, just so they can have her for another at least like what, 50 years? 50 years? Because she's like 39.
It brings me back to the whole coup scenario, and like I've been trying to like listen to people smarter than myself analyzing the coup, and what I hear from people who are serious, who are saying like right now it looks like there's not going to be a coup attempted because they got what they wanted out of Trump and they have no problem with Biden. And by they meaning like the real capitalist classes. There might be like right-wing fringe elements that could accelerate things that then the establishment would like take advantage of. I wouldn't put that past them, but in terms of like really powerful people who would pull a coup, it got me thinking that if there was a left candidate, I think they would try to coup Bernie.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Or they would have just tried to spike it from the start. Like I could see the corporate media just like, you know, putting their finger on the scale, and the Democratic establishment also not helping much with the Bernie campaign. Yeah. And I think they would have made it really hard for him to win. I still think he would have won. But yeah, like, would they have been all right with a complete fascist coup at that point? Yeah. And also, I think it's important to point out, 2000, that was a coup. Yes. That was a soft coup. And people need to, you know, take that into their body.
Real shit, well said. I seen it described rather than democracy is to, like, recognize that, like, we live in managed authoritarianism. You know what I'm saying? There's like such a degree of consensus between the two parties that they have authoritarian control, and then they manage the appearances and the details, you know, but it's like, yeah, that's just the reality, I think, or a more accurate description of the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my gut instinct going into the election was there wouldn't be a coup because the ruling class is kind of done with Donald Trump, at least for now. Yeah. Like, they got the Supreme Court to be the most regressive it's ever been, potentially. They still, like, the Republicans still have the Senate. In hindsight, you know, they don't care if Biden's president. Nothing's really going to change. He's even said nothing's going to change. So I think a continued Trump presidency would be more of a threat to the legitimacy of this government than Biden being half their body. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, at least hopefully the idea is that Biden like reads off the teleprompter and takes the right, like, you know, concoction of meds to like get him up and going for like 20 minutes tops, and then like disappears into the shadows. Maybe Kamala will come out, or her husband will come out, you know, and say some other things, but it'll just be it will look nice. It'll look pretty, business as usual. We have a woman of color as vice president, first woman, first person of color, first Asian, first Black. Like, you have a lot of, you know, these firsts embodied in one person, and that does enough to be like, we did it, y'all. Yeah, exactly. We got this.
Joe Biden's like me before a work meeting. I got to quick smoke half a blunt before I get on this room to make sure I'm sharp enough. You know what I'm saying? Then hopefully it lasts me 2 hours. So I could get through my notes. No, I think that's really well said. You know, that brings me to a point I wanted to make sure we talked about. Is Prop 22 in California. I think is a very important reflection from the elections. So just like an overview, and I'm not like an expert. I'd encourage people, or maybe Isaac, you know more, but like there was a law passed in California which was going to require these gig app services like Uber and Lyft and Grubhub to classify their workers as employees, actually. So their whole scheme from the beginning was to like completely slash the labor costs and outmaneuver then the taxis, because they could just contract out people, you know, they cut their costs, right? So then I think it was organizing that happened that created this state law, which was going to make them classify their employees as employees. So then that would come with health benefits, insurance. It would require these firms to pay into like the state pension funds and to act like the capitalist class has to act, that was forced to act through like the New Deal, etc. And Uber and Lyft and the Silicon Valley app kind of barons, right?
Yeah.
They wrote their own law, Proposition 22, which would exempt them from making their drivers employees and basically lock Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Grubhub, etc. into the status of independent contractors, which means they can't collectively bargain ever. It means they don't get health insurance the same way. They don't get medical, all those benefits. And it means that these companies don't have to pay into like the state pension funds.
Yeah.
This was a ballot initiative statewide in California. So as people were going to the ballots to vote for president, they were also voting yes or no on Prop 22. And it passed. Uber won. Yeah.
It also had a provision in there that like it needed a 7/8 majority for it to be overturned in the legislature, I believe.
Whoa,
I've seen that too.
7/8?
Yeah, so the only way it would be overturned is another ballot initiative. I just want to read this tweet from Mike Duncan. If you've ever listened to Revolution's podcast,
Hell yeah.
he's great. If you haven't listened to it, really provides some great historical context to things.
Mike Duncan, come on Money Power Land Solidarity podcast.
Seriously. He said, if Prop 22 is any kind of bellwether for the future of America is incredibly grim. 150 years of basing socio-political safeguards on the concept of employment, poof, pretty much have to start over from scratch now. Before I'm misunderstood, no, Prop 22 didn't start anything, cause anything, or end anything, but it is a solid proof that the gig economization of the American workforce will continue to expand in size and scope. The precariat will grow ever larger. If we care about creating a happy, free, secure life for people, the obvious answer is reorient the entire social safety net away from the concept of employment, UBI, universal health care, etc. But the prospects of any of that happening, I suspect, are grim.
Yikes.
So yeah, I saw that and I was like, this is coming from a historian.
Yeah.
Someone smarter than me.
Yeah. And he's not necessarily like a polemicist, like he's like more taking like a view of things. Yeah, it's real. I think it's really important. I think that's a huge story for people to follow. I was looking into a little bit, and I think is to recognize it was the most expensive ballot initiative ever in American history.
Wow.
So the tech companies that wrote this law and then passed this law intentionally to override another law that people had fought for, they spent $200 million to do this. One of the chief architects of the campaign is Kamala Harris's brother-in-law, who I think is also being mentioned for a cabinet or a transition team position.
Oh, really?
But he helped to craft this campaign. They won it through just a blitz of media, billboards, radio, TV ads, even to the point where they used the app technology to promote Prop 22. So if you got into an Uber or a Lyft in California over these last couple months, before you accepted the ride, you would have to say, I'll vote yes on Prop 22. And they just rolled out all the classic anti-worker union busting propaganda saying, this is going to make life more flexible for our drivers.
I hate that.
This is going to mean our drivers can basically created a complete dishonest campaign that would make it seem like voting yes was good for drivers when it absolutely wasn't. They made drivers agree to that. Just a huge propaganda campaign, you know. So I think it's important for us to reflect on across the country, because also what I'm hearing is that this is going to be rolled out across the nation. They're either going to try to pass federal legislation of this sort or go state by state. So we have to be able to prepare for this type of thing.
I think also Kamala Harris's niece, Mina Harris, who is a campaign surrogate for her, I believe, also works for Uber too, in some sort of engagement role. But reading more about Prop 22 and kind of like the campaign behind it, it gave me major Pathway to 15 vibes for those who remember the Fight for 15 in Minneapolis a few years back. And this whole mobilization on behalf of management and owners to get their servers and support staff to lobby for this, Pathway to 15, which would enact a tip credit locally and would harm them at the end of the day. And so obviously Prop 22 was much larger and more successful in the end, but just it's really insidious when you get workers to actively lobby against their interest through coercion and propaganda. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that it's like, oh, flexible hours, I just read that as flexible hours, meaning you can work yourself to death easier.
Yeah.
With, again, no protections, but just like, you can work more than 40 hours a week. You can go after whatever thing you're going after and still earn pennies and not be like have anything that's like going into your future, your livelihood. There's no care for you.
No.
It's just like, can you produce? Can you work for us for as the lowest amount of money as possible?
Yeah. It's a scary thing. It's another thing I think, kind of going back to some of the themes we have been talking about, is there was a really manipulative, aggressive use of like racial equity language to sell this Prop 22, you know? So the majority of gig economy workers who have been fighting and organizing for employment status, for a union, for better conditions, are black and brown people, you know, are working class people, are people of color. And Uber and Lyft, you know, at the same time as they rolled out this Vote Yes on Prop 22 campaigns, they were rolling out billboards like, if you condone racism, delete Uber. Which is like, okay, cool, strong statement, you know what I'm saying? And but it's like, that's corporate PR, when at the same time you're shifting a large block of black and brown and working class people into like permanent serf status, locking them out of basic human rights, and also like really cynically deploying that language in the Vote Yes campaign, you know? So it's like...
Wait, they had billboards that said, if you condone racism, delete Uber?
Yep.
So like Uber is this bastion for racial equality?
If you don't condone?
If you condone racism, delete Uber. Like saying like they don't want racists to use Uber is
so
what they were
Lyft?
saying. Right, exactly. Yeah, I think what they know is like, oh, that's going to make people feel warm and fuzzy, and that's a generally very popular sentiment.
I'm not a racist.
Know?
I use Uber.
Right. So then when you get in the Lyft, then you're feeling good about yourself because you're using anti-racist Uber, and then they give you this line of bullshit that's talking about, make sure you vote yes on Prop 22 because anti-racist Uber wants to make sure workers have their freedom.
Yeah.
And they're saying that was like the toxic concoction that really pushed Prop 22
because it passed like 60%. I want to say like it was pretty overwhelming.
I think I've seen maybe in the 50s. It could be 60s, I'm not sure.
I remember being surprised by like how not close it was, and also very saddened by that. But,
yeah. I don't know too much. I'm not out there, but through my reading, it seemed like, you know, it did the worst in the Bay Area, where there's like strong movements who have been fighting against it, and also that like most people weren't decided leading up to the Prop 22, and like it really came down, I think, that $200 million and just that ability to message. Most people weren't informed about what they were voting for, you know? Yeah,
I mean, because if you're someone who's dependent on Uber, you're more likely have access to resources, you're more likely to actually show out to vote, you know, so it's a very effective targeted campaign in a captured audience.
Yeah, for real.
Guaranteed the whole mood. The rest, you're gonna inherit the earth that holds true. Culture power grows, gonna deal them a few blows. The elders transcended the spirit, the youth grows.